Okay, I put together this lesson on using JetPack Compose following the tutorial that's available on the Developer.android.com website. The reason I've done this is I decided to start using JetPack Compose myself and worked my way through the instructions as provided in the website, and I ran into a number of difficulties. And I'd like to put this information out there just so others can get through this a little faster than I did. It took most of a day to resolve most of the conflicts that I was encountering. Part of that is because you're working with a Canary version of Android Studio. That said, let's get down to it. There are two websites that I need you to access. One of them is the Developer.android.com JetPack Compose tutorial site, and you can find that simply by Googling it. But here's the URL, and I will log in so that I can get credit for this. And the other site is Use Android Studio JetPack Compose. And the reason that you're going to go to this one is it gives you the settings that need to be applied to Android Studio after you download it. So let's go through this step by step. So why JetPack Compose? Well, JetPack Compose is a really big change from the Android Studio with the Java. For one, it only uses Kotlin. It doesn't use the JavaScript at all. And you don't edit any XML layouts or create UI widgets. Instead, the UI is done through coding. And the coding is using JetPack Compose functions. Now, I'm virtually as new to this as you are, so I won't be providing a lot of technical information on the code. But let's start. To create a composable function, you just add the @composable annotation to the function name. So to start with, we're going to download a template, or we're going to load a template when we start up Android Studio Canary version. So it says to begin, follow the JetPack Compose setup instructions. So use Android Studio JetPack Compose. That's what this is. These are the setup instructions. So it says you should download the latest Canary version of Android Studio Preview. And if you click on the Get Android Studio Canary, we'll open that in another tab. The current version is 8. Now I downloaded 8, and I worked far too long on trying to get 8 to function properly. And I finally gave up, to be honest. So, more downloads. Agree to the terms. And here we find Android Studio Arctic Fox Canary 7. Now if you click on this, we have 3 different installers. I have 64-bit Windows, so I'd click on that. I actually clicked on the zip file, Windows 64-bit, this one here. And your download starts. Now, once it's downloaded, you're going to want to unzip that into a particular folder. So for now, I'm just downloading it into the my downloads folder. And this is a relatively large file, and as it says, there's 15, 9, 10, 8, 6, 7. It's probably about 5 minutes to download that in total. Now what I did is I extracted that into its own folder. And then I ran the install on it. And the install is simply, once you've expanded this, go into the bin, down to the bottom of the bin, and my version again is the 64-bit, so I clicked on the Studio 64. When I did that, it said that it needed to be extracted, that all files needed to be extracted. So I extracted all files. Once the files were extracted, then you can run this executable file. Well, when you run the executable file, you are going to get, I'm going to start up a new project here. You're going to get a window that gives you the option of starting a new project. And when I selected new project, you then get this window. Once you get this window, these are templates just as you're used to with Android Studio. In this case, you're not going to use an empty activity though, you're going to use an empty compose activity. And you'll click next. You're going to give it a name, and we'll call this JetPack Compose Tutorial. So you do the same. The options here, the package name is automatically generated. The save location, it's going into my Android Studio projects, and it'll be named JetPack Compose Tutorial. The language used is Kotlin. As I said, that's your only option. Notice there's no click down here. And the minimum SDK, API23. I've discovered that the API23 doesn't work with the lesson. One of the elements in the onCreate uses, what was it again? It's a modifier of some kind for a column, and that modifier wasn't available until API25. So let's move this up to API25. And we don't need to use legacy Android support libraries. Now, one of the things that I've learned about the Kotlin and the JetPack Compose is that you can integrate it with your existing apps. And I haven't attempted to do that yet. And I thought I might as well learn this stuff fresh and start designing apps from scratch using the JetPack Compose, because it really is the method of the future. So then click Finish. As per usual, that's going to take a little while, and it depends on the processing speed of your computer. Meanwhile, let us go back to the lesson. So we were supposed to get the Android Studio Canary, and then they suggest that you try the JetPack Compose sample apps. Well, I suggest you don't try the JetPack Compose sample apps. Every one that I looked at was customized to some degree or another from the basic capabilities of JetPack Compose or of JetPack Compose templates. And for somebody who is a beginner programmer, this has limited value. Best just to avoid the sample apps for now, maybe as you become more proficient in both Kotlin and in JetPack Compose. Well, the other option was to create a new app with support for JetPack Compose. So that's what we just did. So that new app is starting up. And it says start a new project, select project template, the empty compose activity, set the name, package name, save location, choose Kotlin as the language, set the minimum API level drop down to 21 or higher, and we chose 25, then click Finish. Then you have to verify that the project's build Gradle file is configured correctly as described in Configure Gradle. Well, Configure Gradle is on this same page. There's also a Configure Kotlin section, and this goes into the plugins in the build Gradle for the project. And this has to be included as well. Within the Gradle file, you'll find that the min SDK version is already in there, and it'll say 25 in our case. Compose True will be in there. Compile options, the source compatibility Java version 1.8, that'll be in there already. And the Kotlin options JVM target of 1.8 will be in there. The Compose options, this Kotlin compile extension version 1.0.0 beta 01 will not be in there, and we will have to put it in and change what's currently there. And all of these dependencies are new. These are not part of that template that downloads when we start up. Okay, so what we will do here is we're simply going to cut and paste these. And in my case, I commented those out in my version, and I'll show you. So here we have the build Gradle for the app versus the build Gradle, the master, the upper level build. So this is just the app build Gradle. Plugins, com.android.application. This one, I believe, comes with the package when you download it. This one, org.jetbrains.kotlin.android, is one that I think I had to add to get this to run. And as you can see here, the compile version upper is 30. This build tools versions is automatically added. The app ID is created. And there's that minimum SDK version of 25 with a target of 30. And this version code and version name, those are included as well. And this test instrumentation runner was also included automatically. The same with this minify enabled as false, ProGuard files, that also was included. Compile options, there's that version 1.8.1.8. Kotlin options, target of 1.8, user IR equals true, those were included. Compose true and the build features was included. So here in the Compose options, I changed the Kotlin compiler version to the recommended. They had Kotlin compiler extension version, Compose version, and I changed that to Kotlin compiler extension version 1.0.0 beta 01. So you can go ahead and do the same. And we're going to do that. I'm going to repeat all this as you work through it with the new app that we just created. This tasks with type JetBrains Kotlin Gradle task Kotlin compile options configure each. This I also added Java target 1.8, and this came from an information page on using Kotlin 4. That's another thing that I'll get to. It turns out that the Kotlin level that comes with this app is too low to use the code that they ask us to do in the tutorial. So I upgraded to Kotlin 4, and I'll show you how we do that as well. And here's all those dependencies that I changed. So let's see where we are with that download, or with that Gradle build. Looks like the Gradle build is almost over. I'm just going to check the event log here. And then click Gradle build. And we're getting some warnings. Kotlin compiler version is deprecated. And it appears that we're having problems with mapping the new NS to the old NS. But the build was successful in 3 minutes and 32 seconds, but it's currently indexing the dependency still. And it looks like that's finished. So we go to Gradle scripts and build Gradle, and the build Gradle for the app. And there you go. So here the ID is Kotlin Android, but I said the ID is not Kotlin Android. The ID is org.jetbrains Kotlin Android. So we take that. And we place that in there, and we'll just comment out Kotlin Android. What about that ID com.android application? Is that one still there? Yeah, that one I left in there. Didn't seem to cause any problems, so let's go with it. Let's see where we are with the compile version. 30, correct. Yeah, build tool versions, etc. Application ID. Yeah, we've got a different ID. There's our minimum SDK is 25. The instrument runner testing still in there. All the minify enabled. We can ignore that. JVM target. Yeah, build features compose true. Okay, down to the compose options. Now there's changes here. All we need in here is Kotlin compiler extension version 1.0.0-beta 01. So copy that. For me, you guys will have to write it in. So that's Kotlin compiler extension version space single quotation mark 1.0.0-beta 01 single quotation mark. And the other two we're going to comment out. Now the dependencies. So we currently have, within the new dependencies of the new one, all these Android X dependencies, and those will not work. You'll get all kinds of code errors with this. I could show you all this. We could try and run this and then start to write some code and you'd run into a number of difficulties, but I'm just going to save you all that. I don't see the value necessarily in walking through all those problems that I encountered. Let's just get to the solution and then work from there. So all of this is going to be commented. One or two of these we're going to reinstitute. And you can simply go to that web page and copy all of these dependencies. And paste them in. So that's what I did in mine. So let's see what's different between them and that I discovered that we needed. Well, I can tell you from memory that one of the things that I discovered I needed was the app compat. And here's why. Within the code for this, here's your main activity Kotlin class. Class main activity. Note it says app compat activity. So this needs app compat activity. Therefore, app compat 1.2.0, this is needed. Let's just double check against mine and see if there was anything else. That's it. The rest is the same. Okay, now, I also said that you need to upgrade to the higher level Java. So we can do that by clicking to File, Settings, higher level Kotlin, I mean, Languages and Frameworks. Then we click on Kotlin. And it says you have the latest version of the plugin installed, 1.4x. Well, that's because I've already upgraded to the 1.4. And that seems to have carried over to this app. In your case, when you check this, you're going to find it's not 1.4. And that's because by default, you go to the stable releases, the most up-to-date stable, and the 1.4 is an early access preview. So if we check, yours will show stable, and then based on the stable, it's going to show 1.4. Oh, it doesn't even tell you what it is, but I think it's 1.4.21 will be the version installed on yours. But you will click this down arrow and you'll go for the early access preview of 1.4x. And then you'll go ahead with installing it. It will actually install and then you'll go okay and you'll be done. And now we're actually ready for the lesson. As I recall, if there's anything else that we encounter with this, it's going to show up as we actually work through the lesson. And the lesson starts with the main activity KT. Well, let's just talk a little bit about what we have here and the changes that are associated with the Android Studio Canary version. First, I'm going to sync because a number of changes to the Gradle files, and that always requires a sync. And then I'm going to show you what happens when we start to change some code. Because you're no longer using the XML, the XML file with its accompanying layout window doesn't exist anymore. Instead, what we'll use is the layout inspector if we want to see what it looks like on the device. The other thing is you can still run it with the emulator, and in these upgraded versions of Android Studio, the emulator runs faster and smoother. I'm not going to use the emulator. I am actually using an external device. Instead, I will just show you the layout inspector as we make changes. The other thing is there's a new window that pops up that shows you the changes that you made on an individual basis based on something called the default preview. So whatever is in a preview will show up in a small window over here. Now notice we've got a red error here with our set content. And here it says there's an unresolved reference. And the solution to this is to import. So I'll click import. Okay, so that's done. Now this preview at composable function. Oh, and these are functions. The fun is function, just like a method. So this default preview function is generating whatever is in here. And it's saying no process selected. What do we need to do here? So I'm going to select my device and this app. And we have live updates checked, which means as we make changes to the code, it's going to show up in the layout inspector. And I haven't run the app yet, so it's not showing up. Okay, well let's run it, just as the code currently is. Okay, well maybe we'll make those changes right now so that you could actually see this. Just one more thing I forgot I had to do. This is a JetPack Compose tutorial theme, and I found that there was an error with this as well. It didn't show up initially. It did start to show up once I added coding, and this had to do with the resource files, values, themas, and these two themes XML were giving me errors because they were using colors that didn't exist or weren't available. They're custom colors. Okay, and then we have to do some changes in the themes XML, same thing. And theme overlay app compat day night action bar again. And we'll delete the variant. And we'll delete the variant. And we'll change the color on primary to color secondary. And what did I do again in the other one? Themes XML. So I end up with color primary, Android color secondary, color accent. So we'll change this one to accent. Do away with this black. And I'm going to change this to color primary. Okay, that's all done. Now we'll run the app. And that's finished. Okay, are we getting any red anywhere? Main activity KT is okay, these are okay. Let's run it. I'm going to close the event log. Open the layout inspector. Go into our main activity KT. I've been messing around quite a bit more. I shut down the recording for a bit there while I got up to speed. Now I still had a problem with that exact same error in the Gradle build. And I resolved that by actually changing these class path settings. There was a new error also that showed up that said there was some incompatibility with the Alpha 08 version that I had. We had a plugin for JetBrains Kotlin Gradle plugin. It was 1.4.30 ;RC, and an error suggested that the incompatibility arose here and that I needed 1.4.30. So I changed that dependency to 1.4.30 in my build Gradle to fix that error. And then I did a resynced, and when I've resynced, I now end up with an error that says change the Gradle version in the Gradle wrapper to 6.8.2 and re-import the project. That re-import the project, really I just have to rebuild at that point. That is sync and then rebuild. Now I had forgotten I had to do this on my app as well. Just another fix. So we'll do that. Let's go into the Gradle wrapper. So if you go over here, settings, Gradle, ProGuard rules, Gradle wrapper properties. And here we have Gradle 6.8.1 bin. We're going to change that to 6.8.2 bin. Okay, and then let's try our sync again. We have a successful build. Let's see if it'll run. I'm currently using my external device, and it will have to do an install as well after this build finishes. So the debug appears to be working. There is this error, remove usages of JCenter Maven. This JCenter has been discontinued, and I forgot I also made this change in my build Gradle. You see here that it says JCenter. That can be changed to Maven Central, and it seemed to work. So we'll make that change. It doesn't affect the success of the build anyways. Apparently, most of that's been ported over to a Google database or Google server. Gradle build finished. Resetting the indexes, installing to my device, and launching the activity. And the launch has worked. And I will close this event log, and I'll show you in the layout inspector. So take a second to load. Okay, there we go. So we have Hello Android showing up on the screen. I'm going to minimize that. And we're going to change this greeting from Android to Developer. And this will automatically launch our preview when we make a change. We're going to do the same down in the default preview because we want the preview to match our application code. So we make that change, and this launches this preview window on the right. And the preview window will simply show a greeting that says, "Hello, developer." So this function greeting takes as an argument a string. The string is provided when we call that function. So greeting is called here. And then within the brackets, we provide a string, and the string is developer. So that's passed to this function. When it's passed to this function, a text field is generated that says, "Hello," whatever the string is we supplied. And the string we supplied was developer. So it comes out as "Hello, developer." And this is the same coding that's up here. So this calls this function and provides the string, passes the string to that function. And both of these functions are composable. So there we go. This default preview, this preview shows up simply because of the default preview function. Okay, back to the lesson. And this should take us to the tutorial. There we go. JetPack Compose Basics. Lesson 1, composable functions. So, follow the JetPack Compose setup instructions. We did that with a whole lot of extra work. And they want us to build it step by step. First, delete the greeting and default preview functions and delete the set content block from main activity. So our set content will now no longer have that layout reference. Instead, it'll just say set content text hello world. So let's just copy that. Control C. Control V. And then they're going to ask us to do the same in the preview. Oh, and we're supposed to delete the default preview functions. No, we want to define a composable function. So do we already have that? Yes, we do. So we're going to add the @preview annotation before @composable. So this function here, and it's called preview greeting, takes no arguments, and the greeting is the word Android. And we changed that. Here it is, @preview. It's got this extra modifier, show background equals true. Still an @composable, default preview, doesn't accept any arguments. We're going to get rid of this JetPack Compose tutorial theme, delete it. And the greeting, they want it to be Android. And up here in our set content, we're going to change this to calling that function, greeting. Do I have a misspell here? Oh, I see. This bracket's not supposed to be here. Greeting, name, Android. Okay, so we're passing Android to the greeting function. We're passing Android to the greeting function for the default preview. And then for default preview, to see that, we need to refresh it, build and refresh. I'm getting an error here somewhere. I think I've got an extra bracket. There we go, we're all cleaned up. No errors. Let's build it. So I'm going to do a full build. And the Gradle build is running. Now these Gradle builds should be much faster. Let's see how long this one takes. Okay, well the Hello Android is showing up, but the Gradle build is still running. It's now 8:32 and we started at 8:31. Still running. Let's move on and see what the next step is. Okay, layouts. So just as it was with the XML, the UI elements are hierarchical. So if you had put something into the layout manager and put it sub to another layout view, then that was lower in the hierarchy. So similarly, the code in this creates layouts that are hierarchical. And you build the hierarchy by calling composable functions from within other composable functions. So we're going to start with some text. So we're going to go back to the activity and replace the greeting function with a news story function. And then we will modify that news story function. And you no longer need to touch the activity code. So we'll create a default preview function that does nothing but call a news story function, just as we did before in the case of the hello developer hello world. So we're going to add text to this function news story, and you'll find that the text all overwrites as shown in this view to the right here, and then we're going to use a column to separate this. So let's go ahead and make the changes. So we're going to set the content to call news story, and news story is going to have this content. So we change our @composable function to news story. And we're not going to have to take any arguments. And we'll keep our default preview function with the same name, but it will now call news story. And empty brackets. And instead of text, I'm going to delete that. We'll just copy and paste from here. Text. C. B. Close this up and get rid of some spaces. Condense it. Okay, I'm just going to run that sync that I never did. Just get that warning out of the way. Change in the Maven repository. Okay, my Gradle build finished. Okay, once we've run the build and that sync, and then run the program on our device, we can see in the layout inspector that all of the text within news story is overwriting each other. And we'll fix that now with a column. So this lets you stack elements vertically. The default stacks them one after another with no spacing, and the column is justified to the left, top left corner, as shown in this preview. So let's do that. Let's put those within a column, and the syntax for that is column and a curly bracket, then all of the text elements, and then another curly bracket. And notice that we get an error with column. unresolved reference. So let's import it, and that fixes that up. Then if you go up to imports, there it is, JetPack Compose Foundation Layout column. Okay, let's build that with the changes. See what we end up with in our layout inspector. And the builds are running much faster now. Okay, changes were not applied. Requires an app restart. So let's reinstall and restart. I thought that's what I did, was apply changes and restart activity. Let's click on it here and see what happens. And termination simply stops the app on the device and the emulator if you're using it. And restarts it. And that has restarted. Let's see what we end up with now. There we go. Now in our layout inspector, we can see that they're one after the other, but they're justified way to the left. We have no padding around that at all, and I think the next step is that we're going to add some padding. So add style settings to the column. So we can pass parameters to the column call. So using smooth bracket, we can use a modifier, and the modifier is padding, and we're going to pad 16 dp around the text. Let's do that. Add bracket and modifier equals modifier, what was that syntax again? Dot padding bracket 16.dp. Do we have enough brackets here? Looks like we do. We're getting an error. First one's in modifier. It says to import it, so let's import it. Oh, we've got various options. There's Android X Compose UI, Java Language Reflect, Java NIC file. Let's go with the Android X. And padding, we're getting an error there, unresolved reference padding, so we import. And we have an error with the DP, unresolved reference, we import. And everything seems to be fine. Let's apply changes and restart. Still tells me I have to reinstall and restart the app. This seems to be a bug in this version of Android Studio, because that is what that is supposed to do, reinstall and restart. Okay, it's running on my device, and the window for the layout inspector is refreshing. And what do we have here? Well, we now have padding around it. Much better. What's next in the lesson? We're going to add a picture. And we're going to use the resource manager to do that. First, we have to download an image. So I'm just going to click on that and download it. I'm actually going to put this where it needs to be. So it's being saved as a PNG file, but let's put it inside, our project. So where are we again here? JetPack Compose Tutorial. App. Source. Main. Resources. Drawable. Save. So we put that in our drawable folder. See if it's there. There it is. header 1 ping. It's giving me some kind of an error. So we want to modify the new story function. We're going to add a call to the image function to put the graphic in the column. So this must be a built-in function. So the composables are available in the foundation package, which you may need to add. See JetPack Compose setup instructions. We're going to find out if we've got that or not by trying to see if it works. And it says the image isn't going to be proportioned correctly. And you have to provide a content description for the image. And we'll set that description to null. That's here, content description is null. And we used to do this in the editor for the XML and for the layouts and for the views. So the content description for that view would have been set to null in the attributes window. But here we're doing it in code. So let's just copy this. So this looks like it goes after our modifier. And before our text. Double check that. Okay, image is giving us an error. Let's import. Image Android, graphics image bitmap. Let's go with Android media. Oh, I don't know. Android X Compose UI modifier, Kotlin string, UI graphics. Let's choose that one. Painter resource. It says hit Alt Enter. Header. Create a drawable resource for file header XML. Oh, we don't want header XML. We want header.ping. Well, it says that it's supposed to be able to use a ping file. Oh, okay. That's why. It's header 1. Oh, this is an inappropriate name. I'm going to rename it. No, we'll just refactor rename. And we will call that header. One. Refactor it. Okay, that's gotten rid of the error. And we will call this header 1. There we go, that's fixed it. Content description is null, unresolved reference content description. Oh, there's a comma after our drawable header. Okay, that fixes it. Well, see if our picture shows up now. I'm going to stop the app, run it. Gradle build running. Let's look at our layout inspector. All right, so in our code, we put the image before our text. So, as I said, or as they said, it's hierarchical. So the text is now below the image. and that's the image they provided. So we're going to pass a size modifier to the image now. So now we'll be putting a comma after null, just as we had a comma after the painter line of code. So content description is null, comma, modifier equals capital modifier dot height 180 dp dot fill max width, empty brackets, comma. Then we're going to scale it. Content scale equals content scale dot crop. Content scale crop specifies that the graphic should fill the width of the column and be cropped if necessary to the appropriate height. Okay, I'm going to be lazy and copy this. So once again, we get some errors. Click on height and we have to import it. Fill max width, we have to import it. Content scale, we have to import it. All good. Stop. Build. Layout inspector. Just want to show that even in our preview, the added code is showing up. So all the preview calls is news story. But since news story contains all this code, then everything that's within news story is showing up in this preview column. See what we've got in the layout inspector. Okay, now the image fills the entire width of the screen. Fill max width. Which is the width of the column, apparently. We still have that padding around the text. It doesn't really seem significant at the top here, though. Not sure what's going on there. Let's see what's next in the lesson. So we're going to add a spacer to separate the graphic from the headings. So it looks like it's going to bring it down from the app bar, and it's going to put a space between the image and the text. So this spacer modifier appears to simply be an element that's actually put below the image. So it doesn't modify the image. What it does is it's simply a spacer, an actual object, and that object will occupy that space between the image and between the text. So it's going to go outside of crop bracket. So I'm going to copy that. And it's looking as though we're going to have to import again for the spacer. Preferred height, rename reference. Let's check out more actions. This command does not seem to even be recognized, and it can't be imported. Let's double check that syntax. Let's see what options we do have for modifier. Preferred height isn't one of them. Let's see if height is. Let's try height in 16 dp. That seems to work. So there's a disconnect between the tutorial and the actual code that's available. See if this works. So within this preview window, we should see a space increase between this text and this image. Gradle build is running. Okay, on my device, there's a space. It's not showing up in the preview. Let's see if it shows up in the layout inspector. Seems to. There we go. There's now a space between the image and the text. Oh, it was just delayed in our preview. There it is in the preview. And now we're going to use some material widgets. We'll be applying a shape. So we're going to reshape the image to put curved corners on it. We're going to style the text. It'll use a material theme, default text style. And then we're going to apply specific paragraph styles to each text element. Okay, well, let's get to it. Style the text. We're going to apply a material theme to the components we've created. So we've got that spacer modifier, and we had to modify that code. For each one of the text elements, we're going to assign a style, typography H6, and we're also going to include this material theme under new story. So it'll be, remember we deleted this before, the material theme, we're adding one back in, and it'll be val typography, so value typography equals a material theme dot typography. Let's just copy this. And this goes just before column. Okay, that's in. And style equals typography H6 for our shark fin cove. So that's a heading, I assume. H standing for heading, body standing for body text. So our day in Shark Fin Cove is our heading. And then each one of our Davenport, California and December 2018 are body text. And they'll both be body text 2. And we need a comma after the Fin Cove too, which I didn't do. So let's put in those commas. And then style appears to be something that's going to have to be imported. No. So create local variable style. Unresolved reference style. Are we missing something? Oh, I see. These brackets have to be removed. And that fixes it. So our text is a day in Sharkfin Cove, comma, style equals typography H6. So this style modifies our text, all within the same bracket. Our add preview show background is equal true no longer works. Let's just try removing the show background equals true. Just leave that as at preview. No, at preview is not working. It's probably because of a misplaced bracket. There we go. So we were short a curly brace. Let's fix that error. Let's stop the app. Run the app. Right, so the first text entry is now heading, and the other two are body. Now it suggests that we change the first text element to a day wandering through the sand hills, plus in Sharkfin Cove, and a few of the plus sites I saw. So I'm just going to cut and paste that. Where are we here? Well, we never did apply the shape to our image, which I suppose we should do. How did I end up skipping that? I don't know. Let's do that first. Let's go back and change that shape. So the modifier, we already had the fill max width. We're going to add dot clip shape equals round corner shape just before content scale. Come on. We have to remove this comma. Clip. Import. Import. I think we have to add a comma here. Okay, so these are all modifiers. So there's dot height, dot fill max width, dot clip. So after that statement, then there's always a comma, just as there is after the content description equals null, comma, painter blah blah blah, comma. So modifier, all of these various components, comma. So we really should see how that looks, see what our image looks like when it's rounded. Let's look at the layout inspector. Oh, those corners don't look rounded to me. Well, they are just slightly rounded. That's really a very, very slight effect. I'm not sure I'm seeing it at all. And I have live update on in the layout inspector, so that should have translated straight across. And I'm not seeing it in the preview either. 4dp. Let's see if we can get something more significant with 24dp. I'll try to apply changes and restart activity and see if it'll work again this time. I have a feeling it's just going to tell me I have to stop it again. Oh, it worked. Layout inspector. Oh, I'm still not seeing rounded corners. Yeah, and it appears that we're definitely modifying our image. Ah, okay, it is showing up in the preview. You can see a curved corner here. And you can see a curved corner there. But it is definitely not showing up in my app. Oh, it is in my app, but it's still really marginal. Very marginal. I'm going to try 44 BP. Yeah, I'd say that's noticeable now. You can kind of see it as a crop. You can still see the frame around it here, but the image itself is slightly rounded on the corners. Okay, that works. Where were we? Style the text. So we're going to switch to a longer title. And that title is The Day Wandered Through the Sandhills, blah, blah, blah. So let's copy that. Everything in the quotation marks. And replace everything in the quotation marks. So now we have a long title. So it says try changing the first text element. So we did that. Now we're going to configure it to set a maximum length of 2 lines. And that has no effect if the text is short enough to fit in that limit. But it'll automatically truncate the text if it's too long. So how are we going to do that with code? Well, there we go. Max lines equals 2. And overflow equals text overflow ellipsis. Not sure what that does, but we'll add it. And this goes after style equals typography H6 comma. Include that comma. We add this. Control C. Oh, we ended up with double comma. Text overflow is coming up as an error. We're going to import it. That fixes that. Let's apply our changes. So we've got a longer heading. And we have ellipsis, overflow styling. And we have a maximum lines of 2 now. We've got an error. Expecting an element in 55. Ah, yes, that bracket has to go. Try this again. Install and restart app. We'll do that. Seems like the arrow's not working again. Okay, it looks like it's cropped it. Day wandering through the sandhills of Shark Fin Cove and a few of the, and it's cropped. So it's cropped sites I saw. Let's see what this text overflow ellipsis does. Use an ellipsis to indicate that the text has overflowed. I believe the ellipsis is the ... which shows up in the text here. And a few of the ... If we made this maximum lines 3, we'll probably get all the text in there. and there will be no text overflow. So I've changed that, and I've restarted it, and it is applying the changes. And as I said before, I have live update checked here, so this should automatically update. But it did not. Seems to me that should have fit on 3 lines. What happens if we do away with the overflow? Personally, this is, for me, the best way to learn to play with these sorts of things. It shouldn't have been a comma. That should be a bracket. Try this again. Oops, wrong type of bracket. It's showing up in the preview, but it is not showing up in my layout inspector. Nor did it show up on my app. I'm going to try closing my app. Rerun that. Okay, it's reappeared now. So I expect it's going to show up in the layout inspector. Yeah, there it is. All right, moving on. Oh, all done. So we've learned the basics of Compose. And we're going to continue our learning. Let's check out the learning experience, see what they have for JetPack Compose. This is JetPack Compose Basics, 1, 2, 3. Here we go. Here we go. Compose by example is next in the series. Layouts in Compose, using state in Compose, Compose theme, JetPack Compose animation. Well, let's move on to Compose by example. Well, I guess we could watch this. You could watch this. I probably will do so on my own time. So they're going to walk through some of the sample apps that I told you about where they got all kinds of modifications. So this is things that the Compose team built, and I think they just wanted to kind of flex their muscles and show how versatile it was. I'm going to skip that as part of this video lesson, but feel free to watch it yourself just to see what the capabilities are.